Hey up! Right, latest news on this Western war against motorists. For the most part, I want to try and keep this video as positive as possible, because due to recent sort of developments, it does appear to me that some cracks are starting to appear in this whole agenda. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be overturned, but at least, you know, the population at large is now paying attention to what the government and to what local governments are doing around this country. And when I say this country, I mean the United Kingdom. So it's possibly not going to be the pushover that those in Westminster and county councils thought it was going to be. Originally, I'd only intended to cover two subjects in this video, but each morning when I turn my news feed on, something else crops up. It just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. I think because the media is starting to pick up on what's going on, various county councils are ramping up, speeding up the pace at which they are basically banning motor vehicles from the roads in this country. And for the most part, the excuses that they're using it is safeguarding the environment, including the pursuit of net zero and improving the air quality in inner cities. Now, over the past 30 years, we've seen the Euro emission standards come in, and they've been tightened up bit by bit every few years until we've got to the point now where, personally, I think air quality in urban areas is better than it's ever been in my life. And I think most people have been happy with that. You know, we've been happy to comply with the, alterations that have been made to our motor vehicles, making them more cost effective to run and at the same time improving the air quality around us. And don't get the wrong idea, I love this planet, I care about this planet, and I want to do my utmost myself to improve things as much as can be sensibly improved. But over the last 2 years, since the pandemic came along and the first lockdowns, we've seen governments across this country bringing in certain sanctions to limit the use of motor vehicles on the road. And for the most part, studies on the effects of these sanctions have revealed that the improvement in air quality is going to be negligible. In fact, the cost of implementing these changes far outweighs the benefits that they will give to the population. Now, starting off with a bit of bad news, Hackney Council has just announced that over the next 3 years, they're basically going to close 75% of their roads to motor vehicles. Now, I am going to leave links in the video description down below to all the sources that I've utilised for making this video, so that you can see these articles in their full context and do a bit of more research from there if you wish to do so. Now, the Hackney Council's plan is to block off certain roads, physical barriers, using wooden planters and other sort of aesthetically pleasing obstacles, to create what they call open roads. They're open to cyclists and pedestrians, but they're closed to motor vehicles. The exceptions to this will be, of course, emergency services, police, ambulance, fire, and refuse collection vehicles. They obviously saw the faux pas that York Council made last year, where they replaced the fleet of refuse vehicles with electric refuse vehicles, and they're all now in storage on waste ground because they weren't fit for purpose. I forget how many millions of pounds of the taxpayers' money they wasted, but if you do a bit of digging on Google, you should find it. The other exceptions to this new regime will be Blue Pass disabled drivers, who will have access to some but not all of the roads. Now, the residents in these areas, I don't actually know whether they've been consulted or not, but they have no choice in this matter. It's simply been forced upon them. And of course, working class people that need a motor vehicle to get to work are just going to find other routes, which is going to cause harsher congestion in other areas, making the air quality in those areas far worse than it is now. I'm not going to posit any reasons as to why this may be, but it is interesting to note that most of the councils that are actually implementing these new regimes are Labour councils. Now, these kind of projects, I'm afraid, are like a nasty rash. They just keep spreading all over the place. We've already seen something similar with what was sort of entitled as the climate change lockdowns in Oxford and Canterbury. The residents, the people that live there, don't want it. It's going to adversely affect working people's lives, and it's going to ruin local economies. I wondered what would happen in these affected areas if local residents banded together to organise some sort of group and just withheld their council tax payments until the local government was prepared to sit down and compromise. Peaceful protests don't seem to work. These councils seem to act like little dictatorships. I seem to remember reading something about in the Oxford Council thing where local residents tried to enact a peaceful protest and the council simply called the police in, who forced those people to move on and broke them up. That certainly isn't the England that I was brought up in. Next up, British Volt, a company that was held by Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister a year or two back, has been a future mega factory. Britain leading the way with electric vehicle technology, a plant that I believe was going to be building and developing wonderful new technology, batteries for electric vehicles. Well, they've just gone bust, owing £120 million to investors and creditors, stating that they've failed to find the investment needed. Now, I think that is very telling, really. Business people that have a lot of money that want to invest that money to grow it, invest it wisely. And I think this is a really good indication that investors in general don't have any faith in electric vehicle technology. Now, the people involved are trying their best to blame this on the pandemic. I don't think it was really the pandemic. I think it was the way that the government shut the country down, basically shutting off the British economy. Now, the car industry has reported that sales of motor vehicles over the last 2 years have been bad, which is to be expected when people can't leave their homes. And of course, it's now common knowledge that EV sales are sort of starting to falter. They are still sort of growing in the UK, but the growth is much slower than was expected. In fact, I think the BMW group announced earlier this month that they were stopping production of the electric Mini. Surprise, surprise. Because the sales simply are not there for it to be worth them bothering with them. Investors are not going to pump their hard-earned cash into a technology that they don't have any faith in. It's as simple as that. And I think we're going to see more of this as the next 2 or 3 years roll on. Elon Musk is already having to heavily discount his Teslas to keep them moving, and they're still not moving. Now, I know that electric vehicles will work for some people, but they won't work for everyone. To a lot of people, it's seen as a lame duck technology. Which conveniently brings us along to another announcement from the car industry. Apparently, there's growing dissent among car manufacturers at the government's preoccupation with the electric vehicle. They are not happy. Most of the major car manufacturers are making it quite clear that in their opinions, electric cars are not going to work. The infrastructure for charging using renewables simply isn't there, and in their opinion there's no likelihood of it reaching the point required in the foreseeable future. I mean, this is pretty typical of our government, really. They've pushed everybody down this road. Everybody else is complying with what they've been told to do. But the government isn't. You know, they promised us all this new renewable technology, you know, wind turbines, etc. And roadside charging. Well, when they realised what the roadside charging was going to cost them, they simply passed it all over to the industry and made it their responsibility. It isn't keeping up with pace, and the motor industry predicts that the infrastructure quite simply is not going to be in place by the timescales mandated by the government. I think what hasn't helped here, something that I remember reading probably a couple of weeks ago, is that the latest government mandate is that all vehicles sold by the motor industry, I think in 2024 or 2025, 50% of them must be electric. Now, how the hell can a government mandate that if 50% of your customers don't want electric vehicles? How can you reach that target? Now, there are two sort of statements here from motor industry spokesmen which I think are really telling. One is, but a sea of change is required to bring to a place where the circa 2 million new cars sold in the UK in a normal year can be electric, and there are no signs that the tide is going to turn swiftly enough for this to become reality. It goes on, this is a Mr. Griffiths. Ministers can come up with all manner of high-minded policies from the back of an electric limousine, yet there remains a huge gulf between blue sky political thinking and how much cobalt and lithium can actually be dug up out of the ground for EV battery packs. I think what they're saying there is what the government wants physically is just not possible. The problem, of course, with the political class is that they've grown up in a world of shielded privilege. They are not streetwise people. And there is a huge gulf between their wishes, their requirements, and reality. Right, so that brings us to the two main subjects that I actually wanted to cover in this video. I'm sorry it's taken a while getting here, but this whole thing is becoming so fast-paced that it's difficult to keep up with it. It's quite frightening, I think. And I know a lot of people will come into the comment section saying, and what has this got to do with motorcycles? Well, some of these policies already mentioned already affect motorcycles. And even if they don't at the moment, there will be a knock-on effect that does affect them in due course. So I think it's important that everybody stays abreast of what's going on. Because it doesn't matter whether you drive an internal combustion engine car now, or an electric vehicle now, or a motorcycle. This is all going to catch up with you eventually, and it's not going to be too long. Now, if you remember, last year I reported on the Welsh devolved government's plans to cut motor vehicle travel around Wales by reducing speed limits, removing the ability to park when people get to the destinations or overcharging them for parking, and of course using congestion charges to remove the financial viability of travel for your average working person. Now, for the most part, a lot of these decisions were made behind closed doors. No one's been caught on camera yet sort of announcing these strategies. They're not stupid. They know that footage of them sort of creating these sanctions would cause an outrage. They would become viral videos that would just circulate this globe. We know also that the government in Ireland, an EU country, has recently announced a similar strategy, stating that these policies are not just their goals, they're the goals of the whole EU. So this is not just the UK, this is becoming a global phenomenon. I want you to just watch this clip, because so far all I've been able to do is report on hearsay, something that a journalist has heard a politician saying without any definitive proof, but that's changed. Watch this.
On transport, our second Strategic Transport Projects Review, published just 2 weeks ago, confirms that the era of catering for unconstrained growth in private car use is well and truly over. The review follows the sustainable investment hierarchy, which aims to reduce the need to travel unsustainably and prioritises making best use of enhancing existing infrastructure before investing in new capacity. Furthermore, we have set out how we will reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 in our draft route map, a truly world-leading commitment demonstrating our level of ambition in meeting Scotland's statutory targets. The Scottish Government have commissioned research exploring demand management options to discourage car use. And using the research findings, we will work with local and regional partners to develop a demand management framework by 2025.
Now, this is, of course, the Scottish Parliament following exactly the same route map that Wales and Ireland are following, declaring that the age of car ownership is over. Motorists are basically locusts swarming all over the roads, and they need to get rid of us. Reducing speed limits, making car parking impossible or prohibitively expensive, and making travel in general prohibitively expensive by rolling out congestion charge zones. The Scottish Government is no longer going to cater for the motorist by improving the infrastructure required for motor travel. Bearing in mind that Scotland is not much smaller than England, but it has a much lower population, which means that a motor car or a motorcycle is essential for getting around from place to place, to do your shopping, to see your doctor, to get to the hospital, to get to the schools, and to keep what is already a fairly depressed economy running. Now, I see that speech as a positive, because you can always rely on the Scottish Government to fail to regard the optics of their actions in their rush to virtue signal to the world. Whereas other governments have done this quietly behind closed doors, they thought it would be a good idea to do it in front of a camera, and it has received global condemnation from the press. Everywhere from Japan to America has dubbed this to be an assault on the personal freedoms of the Scottish people. And I think in a lot of ways this has opened Pandora's box, because a video like that has far more impact on the viewer than, you know, a small newspaper article that can easily be overlooked. Don't get me wrong, the Department for Transport here in England announced something very similar, again quietly behind closed doors, back in January of last year, Miss Trudy Harrison. And as much as I know a lot of people consider this to be a conspiracy theory, there, you heard it from the horse's mouth. This is a run-up to the 15-minute city. Now, finally, Sadiq Kahn, Lord Mayor of London, and his infamous ULEZ zones. As I reported last year, the ULEZ zones this year are set to spread to cover the entire of the Greater London area, a massive territory. Now, this is just the personal vanity project of one man, Sadiq Kahn, the Lord Mayor of London. On the face of it, no one else seems to want it, especially not the people that live within those catchment areas. The reason being that for your average working man who doesn't have a car that complies with the ultra-low emissions, it will cost him or her £12.50 a day to travel to work. And I think one news organisation's calculated for the average working person that's going to be round about £3,000 a year. Now, a lot of local councils are refusing to comply with his mandate, but I think the big worry about this is that this man's position is so powerful that he can actually override what those councils, want to do, and just put these zones in place irrespective of them complying with it. Now, I've had the opinion for quite some time that this guy is just a tin pot dictator. His main reason, he says, for mandating these ULEZ zones and you know, their increase in size is to increase air quality in the areas concerned. Yet studies carried out once again have said the improvement in air quality will be negligible, but it will increase pollution in other areas because people will have to take different routes, which will cause more congestion. And I think it's already been proved that the existing ULEZ zones have done just that. They've created a bigger problem elsewhere. Now, I reported on this time last year that it was on the books, and in the interim period, he received a lot of pushback from, you know, residents of those areas. So he agreed to carry out a public consultation. And I can't actually find a reference to it, but it's my understanding that he agreed he would abide by the results of that consultation. And he would rethink his plans. Now, the public consultation ruled overwhelmingly that people didn't want the ULEZ expansion. But he went back on his word and he's decided to go ahead with it regardless. Now, that in itself is bad enough because it shows a total disregard for public opinion. It's like I've said, this is his own personal vanity project. It has nothing to do with the welfare of London citizens. I think really it's about making money because the figures projected for fines through people that have no choice but to travel to work through these zones are phenomenal. The main reason that I'm covering this is because it would seem that during this consultation, on his watch, between 5,000 and 6,000, let's call them no votes, were thrown out in an attempt to redress the balance. And I haven't been able to find any plausible explanation for, you know, the legitimacy of doing that. And not only that, the accusation is that some £160,000 worth of taxpayers' money was expended specifically targeting people that his organisation thought would furnish this consultation with a yes vote, an agreement to the ULEZ expansion. Now, you've all heard of Prime Minister's Question Time. Well, the Prime Minister is sort of interviewed or grilled by the opposition. Well, there is a very similar event that takes place regarding the Lord Mayor of London, the Mayor's Question Time. And it would appear on the face of it that Sadiq Kahn has actually been caught out telling pork pies. I'm just going to show you a quick clip from the GLA Conservatives' coverage of one of these events. I'm going to leave a link to the full sort of inquisition, if you like. I think it's about 30 minutes long, that gives a better context. Here's just a little clip. Here you go.
I'm just interested in your discussion with Assemblymember Fortune. I have here the transcript of the 13th of October. Assemblymember Fortune says, Mr. Mayor, at any point did you sit down and have a meeting and somebody said, these are the results that we have at the moment? Sadiq Kahn, Mayor of London, no. That's what you said on the 13th of October. Was that correct?
The context is the questions up above. You've got to read the transcript from up above. Which
I have the whole transcript here. Is it correct on the 13th of October that no one had given you the results so far?
So I'm quite clear. During the consultation period, which is what the question was about.
No, on the 13th of October, had you had the results so far? You're trying to answer a different question, and I know why, but had you, by the 13th of October, had a briefing on what the results were so far?
So as I said, Chair, the question began from the member in relation to my knowledge during the consultation period, the opening and closing, and that was the context of my answers in relation to my involvement in the consultation opening and closing. I'm also quite clear. The first time I saw the final results was on the 18th of November. It is the case that there was a working summary, not the results. A working summary is one of many items discussed with me as the Mayor in a regular meeting. I have regular meetings with the Commissioner. In one of those meetings, there was a working summary given to me.
Okay.
They were not the results. As I've said, they were a snapshot.
Okay, well, firstly, the context of Assembly Member Fortune's question is very clear because he's opened his question with the words, at any point. At any point, did you see the results? So we know you did. So this is the document that you're talking about. And just so that everyone is clear with the accuracy of the information being supplied by the Mayor, the title of the document is London-wide ULEZ, MTS and road user charging consultation results, briefing for the Mayor, 29th of September 2022. That's the document you're referring to, yes? Which you say is not consultation results.
Chair, I'm quite clear that the results of the consultation were presented to me on the 18th of November. I didn't receive any updates during the consultation period, opening and closing. But as I've said, there was a working summary of the progress as part of a meeting I had with the Commissioner.
That's a very carefully crafted line, Mayor, that you've repeated now. We've heard it several times. This document, which you actually received it about 3 weeks before because the meeting was delayed due to the mourning period, has all the results. It's got bar charts, it's got pie charts, we've got line graphs, we've got tables, we've got breakdowns of results, we've got everything. All the results weeks after the consultation were given to you on the 29th of September, weren't they?
Well, the member needs to compare and contrast the Lever Arch file with the final report that I received on the 8th of November with the working summry.
You're getting confused about dates. You keep saying the 8th of November, you mean the 18th, but that's not correct, is it? It was the 29th of September.
What the member needs to do is compare and contrast the Lever Arch file I received on the 18th of November with the working summary he has in his hands, not just in relation to the number of pages involved in the final report, but also what the final report says versus the working summary, but also the paragraph that will even be in the working summary that says on every single page, this document reflects ongoing work and discussions within TfL and is not intended to reflect or represent any formal TfL or GLA views of policy. It certainly isn't results.
Indeed, it represents ongoing work, which is why when you were asked on the 13th of October, has anyone given you the results so far, you should have said yes, but you didn't. And I think Londoners will reach their own conclusion about how clear and honest the Mayor was in his answers.
Now, actually, he was quite well behaved in this segment. I think what you really need to do is click on that link to the GLA Conservatives channel and watch the entire interview. This man is surly, he's evasive, he's often quite insulting towards his interviewers. But what does seem clear from the full interview is that there has been some shenanigans going on and he's trying to wriggle out of it. To me, he comes over as somebody who thinks he's untouchable. He's like a surly, misbehaving teenager that's been sort of caught out, but believes he's untouchable. Now, this isn't a public inquiry, this is just the Mayor's question time, but there needs to be a public inquiry about this man's action. And if necessary, some sort of criminal investigation. Because if true, the allegations that have been levelled at him constitute a betrayal of democracy. There's no doubt about it, this man has led a charmed political life, and I think that's led to an overgrowth of confidence to the point where he has taken a step too far on this occasion. But more importantly, what I think this does demonstrate to all of us is that these policies, which are touted as a benevolent, friendly mandate to save us from ourselves and make our lives better and healthier, are potentially driven by something which is far more sinister and corrupt. I would love to hear other people's views on this, but please be polite, no arguments. I've got little doubt that this video will be shadow banned, so please share it as much as you possibly can if you feel inclined to do so. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this rather long-winded ramble. I do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button and ensure that your notifications are enabled. I will of course be back next week, so until then please ride carefully and I'll see you soon.